My name's Vincent Medley. I am the Maddie's Director of the Human Animal Support Services Project. Before we get started tonight's presentation, which is compassionate communication, supporting people and pets through human-centered language, I am going to review a few housekeeping items. And I had to read that directly just so I get it right. So in the Zoom, you'll see Q&A at the bottom next to the chat option. Please use the Q&A to submit questions you have to ensure we see your question. Yeah, the Q&A is important just because we need to make sure that all questions go in that Q&A. There's a really great tracking system that makes sure your question gets answered, and I'll make sure your question gets answered. Also, please use the chat to engage each other throughout the presentation, engage the panel. I'll be in the chat as well. We ask that you stay on topic in the chat. In order to chat with each other, please use the blue drop down in your chat box and switch it to everyone. And obviously there is a feature in there where you can direct chat to someone, but anything that you want to have for everyone, please hit that drop down. And lastly, a recording of the webinar will be distributed within 3 days to the email you registered with. If you do not see it in your inbox after 3 days, be sure to check your spam or visit humananimalsupportservices.org/webinars. Okay, so now that we've got the housekeeping out of the way, let's do something fun. Let's get into our presentation. So let me introduce our presenter for tonight's webinar, which is, once again, compassionate communication, supporting people and pets through human-centered language. We are going to hear from Shannon Glenn, the Executive Director of My Pit Bull Is My Family and the North Minneapolis Pet Resource Center program. And without further delay, I now turn it over to you, Shannon.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vincent. And thank you to everyone who is here. Let me get this presentation up. No peeking at the other slides. There we go. Perfect. All right. Everyone can see we're good.
Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right. So today we are going to chat about compassionate language and programming to support people and pets. There is a photo of myself and my two pit bull type dogs, Wilbur and Charlotte. They are expert treat eaters and fart machines. Wilbur has the worst gas right now. I don't know what it is with the spring season and all the rabbit poop, but man, he has really stinky toots. We have Fern, who's the queen of the house. She's a little dog that I never thought I would have. And Max, the cat, who also thinks he's a dog. I've got my email there, so feel free to jot that down and I can drop it in the chat later on as well. So this presentation all came out of a blog from Human Animal Support Services called Animal Welfare Has a Cruelty to People Problem. Now, Haas wouldn't let me call it, we need to stop calling people assholes, but I'm glad that this blog still came out and it is making a huge impact in shelters and rescues across the country and even internationally. So again, thank you to Haas for allowing me to write this blog and to draw some attention to the way that we're treating people within animal welfare. All right. So we have a couple survey questions today just to get a feel of who is on the Zoom. We've got 229 folks on the Zoom. And I'm hoping that all of you can participate in these questions. They are anonymous, so we won't see your direct answers. So the first question is, what is your role in animal welfare? Are you a volunteer? You're a rock star. We all love our volunteers. Adoption counselor or staff, pet resource center team or pet retention services, shelter kennel staff, vet staff, administration, and then of course our organizational leadership, so director level, executive director, presidents. Go ahead and select the one that best works for your position. And as soon as we have a majority, we can take a peek at that. All right. So it looks like about half direct support staff and volunteers, and then the other half admin and executive leadership. Amazing. Thank you all for being here and taking time out of your busy days. We can do the second question. All right, so now we're getting a little personal. Have you ever experienced homelessness? Yes or no? All right, so 91% with no and 9%, so 18 of 192 of you answered yes. So that's 9% of your colleagues. All right, we can do the next question. All right, another personal one, household income. We're getting better about talking about income within animal welfare and what we're all making so we can have equitable positions. But go ahead and select the closest to your household income. All right. So the majority definitely in between that $30,000 to $100,000 range. All right. And I can't remember, is there another question? One last one? Beautiful. If you had an unexpected $1,500 vet bill, would you struggle to pay it? Yes or no? Almost split evenly. 111 of you said yes, and 91 of you said no. All right. Thank you. Thank you for participating in those questions. I promise it's a setup for the rest of the conversation here today. And let's dig into it. So my one rule for today is for all of us to be curious and not judgmental. And I wish I could take credit for coming up with this little slogan, but honestly, it's on a poster in the gym where we host our community pet clinics. And I saw it and I loved it. And I thought it was really perfect for, not only the work that we're doing in that space and working with pet owners that often do not have access to vet care, but also for the way that we approach some difficult concepts and topics within our work in animal welfare. Now, I know I didn't prepare all of you to come with a piece of paper or any supplies, but I do want to attempt to do a monthly budget exercise. And I know that this is difficult because we are virtual, but this is a pretty typical family. You are a family of 4. You have 2 children. You have 3 pets. So 2 large breed dogs and a kitten that your son named Boots. Your husband or your spouse works full time at a warehouse. And then you work part-time in the school cafeteria where your daughter goes to school. Your household income after at the end of each month is $2,550, which is about $30,600 per year. And in Minnesota, the poverty level for a family of 4 is $30,000, which means that your family makes too much to qualify for public assistance. Okay. So you bring home $2,550. So if you can remember that number, that should be perfect. Okay, $2,550. So now going through a budget exercise, knowing that you only have $2,550 to spend in rent, utilities, transportation, food, clothing, household, medical, dental, any loans, your pets, your childcare, other miscellaneous spending. How are we feeling about having to fill out a budget sheet when you only make $25.50 a month? I can see comments dropping in the chat, but I can't read them. And I'm assuming a lot of them are saying it feels impossible or it's going to be really hard.
Poor, not good, stressed,
Yeah,
broke.
stressing you out on a Tuesday evening, you know, that's what we're here for. All right, so your average rent in Minneapolis, let's see, you've got 2 kids plus your spouse. Let's say you want at least a 3-bedroom apartment, so that's $1,900 a month of your $25.50. You also might not make 3 times the rent, so you're going to struggle to find housing. You've also got pets. You've got transportation costs and food. So really, this budget exercise has set up to feel impossible. And often that is what the families that we work with in our shelters and our rescues and in our programs across the country are feeling. So things that you have to think about: what size apartment? Is it safe? Will the apartment let you keep your pet? Can you afford car repairs? What happens if someone gets sick and they can't work or they lose their job? So when we go through this in person, we are all working on this budget sheet and I say, oh, just kidding, unexpected expense. So you need to move, you have an $800 deposit, $250 pet rent, and you can only have 2 pets. So which pet would you like to get rid of? Or rehome? Or bring to the shelter? Is your dog allowed at your new apartment? This is Dr. Kelly. She does our community pet clinics with us and one of our community members' pets. But as we all know, pit bull type dogs are most surrendered to shelters and rescues because of lack of housing that will accept them. Unexpected expenses. You're sick with COVID. You don't have PTO or sick time. So you're going to subtract $300 from that income. So now you have even less to work with. I hope that you had your volume on. I should have given you a warning for that. But as we know, vet bills pop up. Your dog Bubbles is sick. The vet bill is $500 and care credit is not available. You know, with almost 50% of you saying that if a vet bill was $1,500 or more, it would be really, really tough to make sure that you could pay that bill to keep Bubbles safe. So maybe surrendering to a rescue or shelter or seeing if the vet clinic could help out with rehoming in order to get that care is a possibility. Oh, your cat has kittens. Your pet food cost is going to increase $30. Their eyes are really creepy. I don't know why I have that picture in there. I keep looking at it and I'm like, those are creepy little blue cat eyes. But anyway, what we don't need in the midst of our struggles is shame for being human. And I really wish that this was hanging up in every break room, so that we can take a moment and realize, you know, we need to meet people where they're at and we don't need to shame them when they're having a really difficult time. So Vincent gave me the okay to swear a little bit in this presentation. So if you have little ones around, I will only swear a couple times, but just want to give a warning that there will be some explicit language. And that's only because I have seen this coming from the Facebook and social media pages that some of your organizations may or may not run. So if you abandon your dog, you're an asshole. If you put your dog in a shelter where a large number of dogs are euthanized due to lack of space solely because you're moving, you're also an asshole. How many people have seen posts like these? If you can't afford a pet, don't have one. And these are all photos of the amazing community members that we have the opportunity to work with here in Minneapolis through our North Minneapolis Pet Resource Center. Horrible people, pray they never get another animal. Shitty humans should never have dogs, cats, children, or any other dependents. I would rather be homeless before I would dump my dogs anywhere, let alone in a high kill shelter. Now, I bet if we gave the 9% of you on the call who have experienced homelessness a chance to unmute and talk about your experience while being homeless, no one would ever want to experience, what you went through. My background is I managed the only homeless shelter across the state of Minnesota that allowed pets, and I've worked with folks experiencing homelessness for the last, 8-9 years now. And the stories and what I have seen in shelter environments is something that I would never wish on anyone, but we do recognize that shelters are a part of the system and are helping people, but it's still not, it's not a choice for folks a lot of the time. Don't be a dick, keep your dog. So all of those pictures and sayings came from Facebook posts from organizations and folks that may or may not be on the call. But I do want to dig in a little bit into some national pet stats and research. So we know that there's 79 million cats owned in the US, 108 million dogs. There are more households in the last 10 years having pets, seeing an increase of almost 50% of households with dogs in the last 10 years. If you haven't checked out this data from Best Friends, I highly encourage taking a peek at it. Looking through their animal surrender stats, the majority of the reason why pets are being surrendered to our shelters are human reasons, not necessarily animal reasons. So having too many animals, housing continues to be a top reason, caretaker or family death, those non-aggressive behaviors or personalities, and financial reasons. 14.1% of dogs are surrendered due to housing issues, which is still the top reason for canines. And I bet a lot of folks that are on the call are like 14.1% does not seem high enough for the number of housing issue relinquishments that we're seeing. And I would agree with that. I think, those housing issues are vast and the description is very broad when it comes to housing issues. So My Pit Bulls family, for those that don't know, we are a national organization that's based here in Minneapolis that focuses on housing and insurance discrimination for families with large breed dogs and finding ways to provide equitable pet retention resources. So we started out with housing research, and these are the latest trends that we've been seeing. So less than 7% of pet-friendly rentals are actually dog inclusive. When we talk about dog inclusivity, we're talking about restrictions that don't have breeder weight, and also, ones that do allow more than one pet. Of our restricted listings, we're seeing more breed restrictions versus weight restrictions, but many of them have both. And 90% of our dog inclusive listings in our database have no weight or size restrictions. We do include listings that allow pet interviews and also Canine Good Citizen awards in our database. There are very few, but like we say here, over 90 have no weight or size restrictions. We're also seeing $25 to $50 for pet rent, $200 to $500 for individual pet fees, those non-refundable pet deposits, so $250 to $500, and only 2 to 3 pets allowed. So we're seeing a lot of additional fees when it comes to pets, and there's a lot of work happening around the country right now to make pet fees and pet deposits refundable, because not all pets are causing damage. And also on the average, we're seeing about a $200 fee for damages, or the actual cost of damages in apartments is about $200. So still less than those non-refundable pet deposits, the pet fees, and pet rents if you were to add them all together. This is our rental research dashboard. So if you haven't been on our website, I highly encourage that you check it out. We have listings from all over the country that our volunteers collect. We just surpassed our 10,000th data point. So one of the largest rental research projects in the country around dog inclusive rentals. So you can see by state how your state is sizing up, and we can use this information for legislation as well. So if that's ever something you're interested in, I'm always happy to help. So this whole webinar is about human-centered language and making sure that we're meeting people where they're at. So let's talk about some tools. And this is where I want to say, I am not perfect. I am not the know-all when it comes to human-centered language and how we support people and meeting them where they're at. But, you know, over my time working with folks experiencing homelessness and various crises, and through our work with my Pit Bulls family and our Pet Resource Center, these are some things that I have learned, and I hope that I can see them throughout the work that we do in animal welfare across the country and internationally. So one thing to remember is that we never know who is listening or reading. Words can be harmful or healing when we need to pay attention to what we say and how we treat people. These are some of our Northside Youth Council members. So our neighborhood organization has a youth council, and they come to every pet clinic, and they absolutely love running our supply tent and our resource tent for folks. They get bribed with cuddly AF shirts. So if you don't have those for youth in your area, you should probably hit up Cuddly and get some of those because they love them. But these are, you know, the next generation of leaders. They're folks that are really interested in animal welfare, and we want to make sure that we're treating everyone with dignity and respect as they come in our doors because our youth are listening. Do your programs have residency restrictions for support? I know that this is a touchy subject, but here are some of the restrictions that I have seen from organizations throughout the country. You have to have a government issued photo ID. You have to prove your need. So you need to be on government assistance, whether that's Medicaid, food stamps, unemployment, disability, and you need to prove that you're low income. So you have to bring your tax returns. Proof of spay neuter for at least one of the pets. This one was a little outrageous. A conversation with a listed veterinarian on the pet's documentation before providing pet food. You must have had your pets for over 6 months to be eligible. And organizations that charge owner surrender fees without intaking animals. So we have seen organizations that charge owner surrender application fees to see if their pet could be surrendered, not even an actual surrender appointment, but just a preliminary application. And so why is it that we get to define need and what need is enough for someone to receive support? Now, I know that there are some grantors or some programs across the country that require certain restrictions, but we're starting to see those relax a little bit as, you know, we're recovering from a pandemic. There's been a lot of changes and a lot of conversations around equity and inclusion. So being able to remove these restrictions for support really allow you to support more folks. And so what we have decided at our North Minneapolis Pet Resource Center is we have less barriers because we know we can offer more support to those that need it. So we believe that access to pet food and supplies should not prevent someone from having a companionship of a pet. We support community members without income or residency requirements. And our team of volunteers are able to supply neighbors with pet food and supplies once a month, thanks to generous donations from the community and, of course, our amazing partners. And you might be saying, well, Shannon, if you don't means test and you don't know who really needs it, how do you know folks are getting what they need? Or how do you know that those who truly need it are not taking advantage of your program? Or, you know, all of those questions that might come up. Well, we did a survey at the end of last year. Household income. So nearly 85% of our community members have household incomes of less than $40,000 per year. And if we look back to earlier, there were quite a few folks on this call that also have household incomes of less than $40,000 a year. 75% of our community members receive support from a public benefit program. 70% of community members work less than full time or are unable to work. But the number that really matters is that 97.9% of community members have been able to keep their pets at home due to the support of our program. So that's without us means testing, without us challenging, someone's life story to see if they need a bag of food. We know that we're supporting those that need it. We know our community. We've done a lot of work to be able to figure that out. And we've built a ton of trust. And we're able to see some really, really amazing positive results in supporting our community at 97.9%. I mean, I don't know of very many programs that have that high of a success rate, but we're really proud of it. Another thing is making sure that your values include people. So our values at My Pitbull is family, our community, compassion, and collaboration. People are at the forefront of everything that we do. We know that, the people, whether it's our volunteers, our board, our staff person, which is me, the only staff person of the organization, and of course the pets, like everyone is always at the table when we're having conversations about what we're doing. And the biggest thing, like under compassion, is meeting pet owners where they're at without judgment. I mean, that's like my favorite part of our value statement. So now we want to talk a little bit about person-centered language. So for those that maybe have never worked in human services or have just heard this term floating around, person-centered language is language that puts people first. So people are so much more than their substance use disorder, their mental illness, their disability, or their current situation. Using person-centered language is about respecting the dignity, worth, unique qualities, and strengths of every single individual that you encounter. So person-centered language, it decreases stigmas, discrimination, misunderstandings, misconceptions, and feelings of shame and guilt, which is all extremely important when you're working with populations that are in crisis or having to make really hard decisions. So when you're working with someone and you're using person-centered language, the last thing you want them to do is feel shame or guilt for coming to you for help. And so if we can utilize person-centered language, we will be able to alleviate some of these. Person-centered language increases comfortability for folks to share personal information, circumstances, and provides opportunities for education and support. So now think of if someone's coming to you and they are experiencing a crisis, and all you do is go back to that one of the posts that just called people a-holes. How would you feel if someone was across from you and just being like, sorry, your situation sucks, but like deal with it. You're a jerk if you leave your pet here. Like we can't take it. Figure it out. It doesn't provide a whole lot of opportunity for education and support from your organization to that person. And therefore that's going to turn them away and maybe never seek support for what they need. And, may seek other alternatives for care for their pets or for whatever situation they're in. So a little bit more about some examples. So the Center for Practice of Transformation from the University of Minnesota has a whole section on person-centered language. The QR code is there for you as well. So thinking about deficit-based and strength-based language, so strength-based and person-centered are pretty similar. So some of the concepts that we hear a lot in animal welfare is that folks are lazy, they're manipulative, they're resistant, they abuse the system, or they're a frequent flyer. We could also talk about hostile or aggressive, that they're helpless. So maybe they're not aware of resources. So really thinking about how we can change our deficit-based language into strength-based language. Another one is like when you have someone coming into your resource center, and from experience, we've had this happen with us. We've had some houseless community members come in and they need supplies, and maybe this is one of their only interactions with other humans who really want to sit and take the time with them. And so instead of saying like they're needy, we say like they're high touch, right? We know that it's going to take a little bit longer for us to work with these folks, rather than they're needy or taking up too much of our time. So we have quite a few high touch community members that we work with. And, again, it just goes back to them not knowing of opportunities and resources. And so we get to have the opportunity to sit down and chat with them, to make sure that their needs are met for themselves and their pets. Another opportunity is the communications guide for pet pantry programs from Cuddly. You can see on here, this was Fern before she had her grooming appointment, but Cuddly came out and did a photo shoot with us and another local pet food shelf here called People and Pets Together. So really, really glad to be in this guide. And I think that there's a lot of really great information in there, including this chart. One thing on here, the use this side, we do not use clients. So for anyone who's worked in human services, clients is a term that is used all of the time. And to make it feel like we're not just another human service agency, we use the term community members, because everyone that walks through our door is now part of our community. We're definitely not going to call people poor people as they come in the door. So you can see how the green side feels good. The red side does not. It brings negativity into the conversation. So we're working with, we're not helping people, we're not fixing people. Folks that have limited incomes, again, we're not going to call them the poor. Please don't do that. A person experiencing homelessness, a person who is houseless, a person who is currently unhoused. No one is homeless. They are experiencing this part in their life. So just thinking of, the terms that we use and the negativity that could be around it, or the positivity, and hopefully we can lean more towards the positive. Another thing outside of person-centered is talking about ableist language as well. For those of you that are, my age and older, a lot of these words were common words that we used as a kid and as a teenager. And some of us still use these words as adults. It's like how there was a big campaign by Special Olympics to remove the word retard from common language. And so, I think that as we have more conversations around using ableist language, we will continue to remove some of these words similar to the R word. So talking about, calling people crazy or calling them lame, these are, they are ableist. And so really making sure that we're saying what we mean, right? So if something is stupid, it's frustrating or it was annoying. If you call someone a spaz, maybe they're silly or they're dorky. Insane or crazy, I know that so many of us use it. And it has taken me a really long time to remove that from my vocabulary as well. But we're talking about intense situations or really amazing situations, or wicked, right? That's a wicked situation. I don't think anyone uses wicked enough in their everyday language. But really trying to, again, change the language that we use, thinking about the golden rule, right? Like treat people the way you want to be treated, talk about people the way you'd want to be talked about is the end goal. Another option, as we talk about person-centered language, as we have seen it in everyday kind of animal welfare work, is similar to Adopters Welcome. So really embracing community members, encouraging folks to adopt and help them succeed with their pets. So removing those barriers that oftentimes are put in place by organizations. I like to give a shout out. This is Gwen and her cat, Mike Jones. And if anyone on the call is like, who? I do that all of the time to her. And if you don't get that, then you're either much older than I am or much younger than I am. And that is just fine. But we love seeing them at our clinics. And she now brings her whole family into us, like mom, sister, sons, everyone comes to us because we have been so welcoming to her. But as we talk about adopters welcome, I just, again, some data of why we need to be person-centered and break down barriers for support and services and, yes, adoption. So as you can see here, adopted from animal shelter is pretty good. But if you add up breeder, private party, and bred from own pet, we still have a lot of work to be doing when it comes to dogs. So we definitely are, when we say no to someone, we know that the family is going to find a pet, even if it's not from our shelter or rescue. And oftentimes they're going to a breeder, a private party, or potentially having friends or relative with litters as well. So the more that we can do to open our doors and support people, be nice to people, stop calling people a-holes, we will be able to see these numbers dramatically increase in the next couple of years, in my opinion. So just some reminders that barriers to adoption can push people away. Barriers to surrendering can push people away. Surrender reasons, whatever they are, as much as it may infuriate us, they are valid to that family. Folks are struggling. It is hard to find a place to live when you have pets. Pets are expensive. And without support services in place, folks are having to make really, really difficult choices. So instead of, having the mindset of, if you can't afford it, don't have it, flip it and say, what supports can we offer to keep your pet at your home with you? One tail at a time. I don't know if anyone here from OTAT's on the call, but they have an amazing sweatshirt that says it's not rescue if they already have a home. And I think that's the best way to really talk about this work is, if we can keep pets in their home, we're solid at the end of the day, right? That we would have less pets coming in and out of our shelters as long as we could keep them at home. So together, I want us to think about this pledge. So if we can all take a little moment before we get into questions for a compassionate language to support people and pets pledge. So 1, we're all going to agree to see the person first. So you don't have to say it out loud with me. You don't have to turn on your mics, but just read these with me. So I will focus on the person's well-being by respecting the role of culture and other influences such as experiences and environment. You will build trusting relationships. I will be open and compassionate about each person's experiences and establish a trusting relationship by honoring what matters to them in terms of supporting the whole unit. And yes, that includes the pets as well. You're going to consider all forms of communication. You will continue to develop an understanding of the person's situation and needs. And now when I say that you're going to develop an understanding, that doesn't mean that you truly understand everything about that person's situation, but you're going to do your best to understand where they're coming from. You're going to consider verbal and nonverbal communication while determining a plan for support. And I know that we said there were a lot of administrators and executive level folks on this call. I'm calling you out for this, and I really hope that you can continue to do this in your organizations and everyone else on the call too. I will continue to reflect on and advocate for the use of person-centered language to better support people and pets. I will be open to discussions regarding language choices for myself and others, respectfully challenge those that are not using person-centered language, and celebrate positive changes. Now, I gave this presentation for the Minnesota Partnership for Animal Welfare here in Minnesota. And right after I gave the presentation, I had folks that immediately emailed me and said, we no longer have crazy cat lady caretakers. We removed the word crazy immediately after your presentation. And so it's just those small things that we can think about of, making those positive changes within our organizations. So if I can leave you with one last thing, it's to remember that in order to solve our problems that we face, We really need people, and we need them on our side, and we need to treat them with respect and dignity. And I hope that this presentation will help you bring more people into the fold and, save more lives. And of course, let's keep the conversation going. My email's there. My personal Facebook QR code is there. A picture of Fern when she was super scraggly, when I had no idea how to groom her or what grooming even really meant for a small breed dog. So just a reminder that we're all learning about resources and how to take care of our pets. So with that, I will turn it over to Vincent for questions.
All right, so we have a few questions. Shannon, the first one is a little bit of a long one, but I'm going to read it out just because I think it adds some text to this person's question. Here in Philly, we have a lot of unhoused people, and at the PSPCA here, we cannot take the vast majority of surrendered pets. We try to do everything we can to offer alternatives, but every shelter, rescue, social work organization is overwhelmed. People are understandably fed up with the system that fails them every day, and sometimes that gets taken out on the people trying to help, albeit with their hands tied. Any tips on dealing compassionately and non-judgmentally dealing with people who are actively antagonizing you?
Yeah, it's a tough one, and it's something that we all encounter in our work, whether it be you're on the human service side or you're on the animal welfare side. One of the things I have wavered on in the past, and I have learned from it, is to continue to have strong boundaries, right? So you know what you can do, you know what you can't do, and that unfortunately or fortunately is kind of your saving grace, right? Um, for example, we've had community members ask us for support outside of the scope of what we offer. And so because we know that it's outside of our scope, we just say no and sorry, we can't do that, but let's look for other resources. Um, when we feel so overwhelmed with need, um, it's really important for us to kind of look at why the need is happening. And in Philly, there are some really great, amazing human service organizations. And I think it's just working on collaboration and trying to figure out ways that you can support each other even more, to support those people and pets that are experiencing homelessness in the city.
All right, thank you. The next question is from Priscilla Locke. Do you share your survey methodology on your website? We struggle to find successful, respectful ways to gather consistent and comprehensive input and feedback from our program clients. I appreciate your recommendations. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to shoot me an email, I'd be happy to share our survey with you. And you can copy it, do whatever you wish with it.
And we have another question. How do you feel about the ability to use or access technology as a barrier to access? And I believe this, yeah, you know what that means. We use it because we couldn't possibly schedule everyone one-on-one in every program.
Yeah. We are encountering that currently at our Pet Resource Center. Um, we have folks that make appointments. And then we also have folks that just walk in, right? And so we know that technology is a barrier for folks. So we we plan for that. So if you could set aside time for, walk-in hours, or, what we do is we have a pager system. So we have a wait list on site that we manage. So really taking out any of the technology aspects for folks that, maybe aren't as technology savvy as we are. Like we live right across the street from a Section 8, kind of like an elder care type building. As much as, those folks think that they know technology, they might not. So we're there for them to help support them through that process too. But yeah.
All right, thank you. We have another question from Jessica Hernandez. If you have a limited number of food/resources to offer, example would be 100 vaccinations for an event, how do you determine which owners need it the most? Do you just do it first come, first serve?
I think in that case, I would do it first come, first serve. I know that there are some organizations that do it zip code specific. So if you have a specific target area, so if you've pulled data and that is, the area that needs it most, whatever most means, I'm doing finger quotes outside of my camera. You could do that. What we do is, so we have guidelines for our pet resource center in terms of what folks can get every month. And we provide a month's worth of food so that folks can come back in 30 days if they so choose to. But we've definitely been low on food. But we've been able to find ways to get food and be resourceful in terms of that.
All right. And our next question is from Talia Wasserman. One of the hardest hurdles for new staff to learn is not to judge people for surrendering their pets, especially when the surrender reason is I don't want them anymore, or they won't stop jumping on my counters. What would be your advice? What would be your advice to help staff stay respectful and compassionate even after the owner leaves?
Ooh, it's after the owner leaves part that is, I think, the toxic part for a lot of organizations, right? So we'll be upfront and compassionate with the person, we'll take their pets, and then as soon as we take their pets back, there's eye rolls and judgment being made. And really, I think we've talked about this in this movement with fostering and adoption returns, of how when someone returns an adoption, we get so much information out of it. And so now we're getting tons of information from the previous pet owner about what this cat's needs are. And it would be really great if we could turn that moment into a positive and provide resources for counter surfing and, all of that. But oftentimes, pet owners, when they walk into the shelter doors, they're either ready to have an adoption that day and take an animal home, right? We see that end of it. But also if they're walking in with an animal, they've already made up their mind to surrender. And so that they are really, really tricky situations. So one, removing barriers to adoption so folks can bring pets home same day, great. But then also, making sure that, you are able to have conversations about resources to see if it's an option, but also, you just have to change that backroom talk to be more positive. Otherwise, your whole team's going to burn out really, really quick. And I think that's what we're seeing across the country.
Our next question is from an anonymous attendee. Often people don't realize how tone can be just as important as the words you use. What's your recommendation to address this as well?
Oh, we're having that conversation with some of our team members right now. I think tone is always a tricky one for organizations, and learning communication styles. And I guess my question, is it more of staff tone to staff, or is it like tone to community members? I mean, I think there are different dynamics, different power dynamics within the conversation. And I think, if we can do more like emotional IQ work with our staff, also learning about the different forms of communication, the different styles of communication, the like passive aggressive, the assertive, the aggressive, and really learning each other's styles. It's also a different depending on where you grew up in the country. Minnesota, people say that we're always passive aggressive when we talk. And then New York, they're going to be those assertive aggressive folks, right? So really getting to know, everyone's communication style on your team, I think is going to be really helpful.
And to follow up with that, do you recommend any scripting with your staff, or any what do you call it, practicing with your staff, rehearsing interactions like that?
Yeah. So what we do is all of our volunteers, we shadow like day of. Yeah. So Dylan just dropped like role play in the
Mhm.
chat. So our volunteer process is you show up and we're gonna let you shadow us, right? Like there's short questionnaire to fill out. Otherwise, if you show up during the day, we want like let's put you to work. So we have folks shadow and kind of like, oh, what's the term? We used to use it in organizing, like you wagon wheel it, right? So you kind of like go through it together, you sit and watch someone else do it, you can role play it together. So we do a lot of that together. But one thing that's really unique about our organization is we often get to just say yes to people, right? So if our mission is to keep pets in homes, we want to say yes to just about everything that we can in order to make that happen. But yeah, role playing and training is definitely important.
Next question is from Evelyn Dale. Do you have statistics that support free adoptions? Some animal services people believe that free adoptions are not good because people who cannot afford to pay the adoption fee don't have the means to provide for their future care.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of like a revolving door conversation that we've been having in animal welfare, at least over the last 5 years, if not longer. I think if we can get away from the if you can't afford it, don't have it kind of a conversation, especially if 50% of the folks on this call would not be able to cover a $1,500 vet expense, if it suddenly happens. I think again, we just need to get rid of that mindset within animal welfare, especially as we're moving more towards the resources and support services in order to keep pets at home. Um, I believe Adopters Welcome has information around free adoptions, and I also think Maddie's Fund does as well, if I'm remembering correctly. So I would definitely recommend, reading Adopters Welcome and searching Maddie's Fund. Oh, thank you, Elise, for that. It was just dropped in the chat. So I would just, continue to read and do your own research on it. But again, we have to start meeting people where they're at.
Thank you. Yes, and the Human Animal Support Services Project has information on that as well. Next question from Victoria DeGroat. Have any resources for starting conversations with local government officials to help enact changes?
Oh yeah. There are a ton of resources out there in terms of legislation. I'm always happy to talk about that as well. But Best Friends, their legislative team is fantastic and they're really boots on the ground just about everywhere. They also have the action team that you can join and listen to their webinars about legislative efforts throughout the country. But there's a lot of work to be done, and we can all really make some really big changes locally, with housing data in terms of animal care. I mean, there's a lot that we can do to support people and pets legislatively.
Sweet. Yes, thank you. And we Haas also has a policy team as well. Victoria, make a note of that. And we'd be more than willing to help you out with that. Okay, next question. I feel that this is from Hagen Johnson. I feel that often this consistent frustration with citizens gets exacerbated by or turns into burnout. How do you best broach this topic with staff, and what resources are available outside of personal providers?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe one of the last webinars that Haas did was actually about burnout and compassion fatigue. So I would recommend checking that out.
Yep.
Jessica Dulce also is fantastic. She does a lot of work with animal welfare organizations and providers. Also a plug for therapy, like please go to therapy.
Yes.
There are no
Yes.
stigmas around therapy.
Nope.
But yeah, I mean, we have to take care of ourselves in order to take care of others. And if my team is on here, they're going to be like, Shannon, you're, saying what you need to be following. And that I totally get it. We all kind of do that, right? But really focusing on that work-life balance, if leadership on this call can allow their team to say yes to more people and more services and keeping more pets out of the shelter, I think that'll help alleviate some of that burnout as well. Really, really making sure that you're supporting your staff, and supporting them during their burnout phases is critical.
And we have one last question, and I think we'll be done. So we're noticing generationally, this is from an anonymous attendee. We're noticing generationally, we're noticing generational divide on this issue. Millennial, Gen Z sooner adapt, where older generations are more likely to challenge these ideas. Any thoughts on how to cater this training to different internal demographics?
That is a really, really good question. And I think that some of our older generational directors and leaders across the country are starting to drink the Kool-Aid, as we could say, right? They're really starting to understand that, the data is telling, right? We know that more folks have pets. We know that owner surrenders continue to fluctuate. We just experienced a pandemic. We've seen a lot of changes within communities across the country in regards to race relations and, all of these amazing things that are happening. I think that there's a ton of room for improvement. And I think that a lot of current events and the data are really allowing people to start thinking bigger about what we can be doing to change. But also it's kind of on us. I'm going to throw myself in the younger bus, but to really apply that pressure to our senior leaders in order to make changes in our agencies. But also those younger people need to be stepping up for those director roles and running for office and be willing to make the changes as well.
I'll add to that too. Modeling the behavior that you want to see is so important. And for somebody who is, I was born in 1972, and I'm so happy that we now consider people's feelings and how things land on people. It's a different world, and I'm definitely speaking for the older generation as one of the ones that is glad to be in this new world.
Well, we're happy
Okay.
to have you.
So this has been fabulous. Obviously, from the response we got, it's something that as a whole was really wanting to hear. Thank you so much, Shannon, for your great work, and we just look forward. Let me ask you this before we go. Where else can anybody partake of your trainings or the work that you're doing, whether it's a conference or just in general?
Absolutely. Folks can always connect with me online. I'm always happy to do presentations around housing or even, one similar to this at your organizations. Otherwise, the Best Friends National Conference in Houston in the middle of August, where we're all going to be sweaty. I will be given this presentation there as well. So would love to see all of you there. We also always exhibit at the conferences too. I know some folks said that they have our merch in the chat. But yeah, come on out and support us, and we'll help you keep some people and pets together as well.
Wow. So as you heard, she'll be presenting at Best Friends. So make sure you put those requests in to make that travel and to register for the conference. Once again, thank you, Shannon. Just as a reminder for everybody, tonight's webinar recording will be distributed in 3 days. And then our next, just be on the lookout for an email regarding our next webinar, which is Compassion Fatigue, featuring Hillary Hager, who is a vice president of outreach engagement and training for the Humane Society of the United States. My team will share the registration link in the chat. Plus, keep an eye out for our email. Thank you for being here tonight. We'll see you soon, and continue to rescue and fight for people and animals like you have been doing. And contact Human Animal Support Services Project for any support or any questions that you have. Thank you all and have a great night.